I'm not a voter in New York City, and so I have no dog in that fight. And everything that I've read on him, I don't really agree with virtually any of it politically. So that's just where I'm at as a Democrat. I mean, he's not even a Democrat, honestly. It's very clear that the GOP are going to use him as their tentpole on their messaging. And I don't think that's helpful at this point to have that be someone that's been identified as one of the emerging faces of our party.
So that is John Fetterman repeatedly attacking Zohran Mamdani, saying that he's going to be used as a tentpole held up by the right to make the Democrats look bad. And he said that on Fox News, which is always happy to have John Fetterman on these days. So a little bit of irony there, but he's not the only establishment Democrat attacking Mamdani. We also have former Representative Dean Phillips, who had this to say.
Is there room for you and Mamdani in the Democratic Party?
The answer ultimately, I think, is no. We do share many of the same values. In fact, most Americans share a lot of the same values. But as a political party, yes, you want diversity. You want some differences of opinion, perspective, life story, politics, and experience. But when you have socialists in the Democratic Party, I don't know how anybody could argue that that would be beneficial for the party or for the country. Therein lies the great challenge. Same thing on the right, Omar. Is MAGA the future of the Republican Party? If it is, there is going to be a new, grand, successful third party in America because the overwhelming majority of Americans want neither far left or far right politics. They want decency, they want common sense, competency, and cooperation. And no party right now is elevating candidates who represent those ideals.
So just speaking for myself, I have a good bit more respect for Dean Phillips than I do for John Fetterman these days. And yet, I mean, so much of what he said is just such, you're still doing this? All I have to do is say the word socialist and this conversation should be done. Why are you still talking to me? I mean, he's a socialist. You're terrified of socialism, right? Because he grew up in a different time, a different economic context, and clearly doesn't understand that when you get past the label, which is supposed to set fire to Mamdani, and you actually talk about what he focused on, it isn't crazy, and it's not scary, and it's actually not that different than some of the stuff that John Fetterman campaigned on before whatever happened. But they want to just shut him down with the label and imply that for some reason being a socialist is the opposite of being decent and capable and compassionate or whatever. The people of New York have spoken. They think that if they're going to apply those labels to anyone, it's going to be Mamdani. There were establishment Democrats in that race. If they wanted the same old thing, it was literally running against Mamdani, and yet they rejected it. And a lot of people have been learning at least some sort of lesson from that race, but there are still people that, perhaps for ideological reasons, perhaps for monetary reasons, cannot ever learn that lesson.
Yeah, so I agree with John, two different people here with different motivations. So Dean Phillips, I disagree with him on a couple policies for sure, at least. But he's a good guy, and I don't say that just because I know him a little bit from the campaign against Biden, but he had the courage to run against Biden, and so that's why this one is so ironic, because then he got labeled an outsider, and he's been on the Young Turks talking about it, and he's like, wow, that doesn't feel good when they shun you and make you an outsider. But that's why it's so ironic. You're doing that to Mamdani right now. Right? So, okay, we don't have to hate Dean Phillips to think that he was wrong there. And I think he is wrong. In fact, I'll just say more about that. Why is he wrong? Because what do you mean that is socialism, there's no room for that in the Democratic Party? No, there's room for whatever the Democratic voters say that there's room for, right? To John's point, that's their job, not your job, right? And so, for example, I don't call myself a socialist. We've been through this many times over the 20 years we've been doing Young Turks, right? But twist on Bernie's democratic socialism. I call myself a democratic capitalist. In a lot of ways, the policies are similar. There's some differences, but the framing is, for me, democracy helps to check the excesses of capitalism. And so, and it always breaks down to what do you mean by socialism, right? So if you mean by socialism Norway, that's pretty good. Like Northern Europe has excellent policies, right? And some of the Asian countries like Taiwan, Japan, etc., right? Like, we're kidding around about, my wife is from Taiwan originally, her friends are like, hey, are you worried that Trump's gonna deport you, et cetera? Because now the Asian community is a little nervous because a couple of ICE events happened, and they're like, deport me to Taiwan where I would have universal health care? Not that bad, right? So like, if you mean that is socialism, then of course there's room for that in the Democratic. You can't say there's no room for that in the Democratic Party, that's nuts, right? So, but if you mean seizing the means of production, which is something that Mamdani did once say, right? Let's put it this way. Is there room for people to think like that and still be in the Democratic Party? Sure, why not? Am I gonna agree with them? No. Are they going to win overall and like lead the Democratic Party one day? I would be shocked. But maybe I'm a boomer, and maybe one day we'll go in that direction. But even if I don't agree with socialism, I certainly don't agree with seizing the means of production. We're gonna make sneakers? Is that what we're doing? Okay, so the government? No, it doesn't make any sense to me. But the brother is trying to, Mamdani is trying to do something. The reason they voted for him isn't because the voters of New York wanted to seize the means of production, okay? They voted for him because he was actually talking about affordability. And like, hey, you can't afford food, housing, transportation. And New Yorkers were like, that's definitely true. And the second thing he said was, and I'm going to try something. I'm going to try to do something about it. And all the other Democrats were like, I'm not going to try anything. No way. Status quo, baby. And that doesn't belong in the Democratic Party, right? Democratic Party is supposed to be for challenging the establishment in its roots, fighting for the average guy, not fighting for the powerful, not fighting for the donors, not fighting for the status quo. So Mamdani is closer than there. So then Fetterman is disqualified. I mean, he's a lunatic at this point. So like, he's the guy that they would say about him when he was running in his primary in Pennsylvania, oh yeah, he's with Bernie and those guys. They're not real Democrats. Now he's turning around and saying, no, I disqualify Mamdani. He's too progressive. He's not a Democrat. Okay, dude, I mean, you've lied about everything, but it's just unbearable. So Fetterman's a different animal altogether. Mark, what do you think?
Well, I mean, sadly, labels matter. I like your label, democratic capitalist, as you sort of you label yourself. Socialist still has, sadly, it has some stink on it. And you're right. It depends what you mean by socialism. I mean, communism and socialism, Marxism, these are all different things. So when you talk about seizing the means of production, the Marxist communist sort of extreme, that's not really reflected by anything that he says during his mayoral race or even in the primary. And even his breakthrough concepts are not so far off of what is being suggested by even Eric Adams. That is to say, complete limit on rents, I mean, total rent control in the city and parts of the city of New York, and of course, taxing the wealthy. These are breakthrough ideas that, as Cenk has just mentioned, treat a problem in New York. New York is too expensive. People are suffering there, and under the withering cost of living in the city comes this breakthrough guy with ideas to address those problems. And that matters. You want to call him a socialist? Call him a socialist. In the end, those labels will fade, perhaps, and the ideas will carry the day. But labels matter, and when you talk about Dean Phillips, last thing, he's speaking to what he perceives as the appetite in America for these kinds of candidates that have those labels attached. I'd say, look at the ideas before you look at the labels. People are looking for ideas now, particularly as the gulf between the haves and the have-nots increases. I really feel the breakthrough candidates like Mamdani, but on a national level, those with real ideas, they're going to carry the day. And these labels, which still, as I say, are significant, they are going to fade, and they're going to fade behind the real ideas for change. And as you know, and you point out on TYT all the time, the Democrats have to step up with real ideas. If you want to win power, you need real ideas. You can't just say, look how bad those guys are.
Yeah, so super last thing on this, on the policies. Like, so let's say three of the policies that he mentioned, rent control freeze. Now I don't think rent control works. So I know a lot of people on the left disagree with me, but he's not talking about making all of Manhattan rent control. He's just talking about the rent control that exists, freezing the increases on that. And that's a much more justifiable policy. Even if I don't fully agree with it, like, it's not revolutionary. Like, so Karl Marx isn't coming to seize Manhattan. right? So like free buses, I wouldn't have thought of that. And although it's closer to what I would have thought of, like I get the idea behind it. But I'm glad he suggested it. It's an interesting idea. The grocery stores run by the city. I wouldn't have been anywhere near my priority list, but an interesting idea. So why don't we try it? And that's what the voters of New York are saying. Why don't we try? We already tried, you guys. Status quo, don't change anything. That didn't work out for us. Now we'd like to try new ideas. And maybe, guys, maybe 2 of them failed, but one is a spectacular success. And then we realize, oh my God, the cities can run grocery stores. And then we realize, wait a minute, actually it turns out governments can run banks. North Dakota runs a bank, did you know that? And it's actually very, very successful. Huh. That's why you don't just stick with the status quo. That's why I'm in favor of Mamdani, even though I'm not sure I agree with any of his policies. At least the brother's trying. Yeah. And I wanna try, and I wanna see if those things work, as opposed to let's go back to Andrew Cuomo and do nothing but deliver for the donors. No, thank you. No, thank you.
I agree. You start with the grocery stores, then the banks, then the shoes, and then you seize the means.
Okay, or maybe we have public health insurance, which every other developed nation in the world has, and we get to a reasonable conclusion. Every time you ring the bell below, an angel gets his wings. Totally not true, but it does keep you updated on our live shows.